Thank you, Klepper. Roman Moore here, the News and Sports Director and Midday DJ at Crystal 93. That's right, we wear a few different hats up here in this neck of the woods. I'd like to welcome our candidates here vying for the seat in District 1 of the Summit County Commissioner's race. Dan Gibbs, the incumbent, the Democrat, and also Allen Bacher in the studios. He's the Republican challenger. Gentlemen, welcome to Crystal 93 and welcome to our second in a series of forums that we'll be doing. Good to have you in here. I do appreciate you taking the time out to be here to do this forum. Our format tonight is going to be very simple. I'll have a list of questions that I will ask each candidate. They will be common questions. They'll be answering the same question. Once we go through those, I'll have one question specifically for each candidate. And then we'll have closing statements by each candidate also. But welcome to our forum for tonight on Crystal 93. We are live, but we are also being videotaped by Summit County Television. And you'll be able to see this forum as well as hear it again by going to summitnews.com online. Or if you have Comcast, you can tune it in on Channel 10 on your Comcast setup. Gentlemen, I am going to read the bios right now. Do you have a preference on who starts? No? Well, I'll start with the incumbent then, Dan Gibbs. Dan Gibbs has served on the Summit Board of County Commissioners since 2010. He says he feels blessed to represent Summit County and is working to make a difference in the community he lives in and loves. As a county commissioner, Dan has successfully pushed for affordable workforce housing, lower health insurance costs, wildfire preparedness and protection, and improvements to transportation infrastructure. He's a respected collaborator and a strong proponent of building partnerships across agencies, nonprofits, and private sector organizations to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of government operations and services. Prior to his tenure as commissioner, Dan represented Summit County in the Colorado House of Representatives and in the state Senate. His legislative accomplishments include securing funding for wildfire mitigation and forest health, workplace accommodations for nursing mothers, offering of bachelor's degrees at Colorado Mountain College, and stricter chain laws for trucks on interstate highways. In the Senate, he chaired the Senate Transportation Committee and served on the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. Dan is a certified wildland firefighter and is affiliated with the Ross system, through which he is on call to fight wildfires throughout the United States. He chairs the Summit County Wildfire Council and serves as vice chair of the statewide Wildland Fire and Prescribed Fire Matters Advisory Committee. Dan serves on numerous civic boards and committees, including the I-70 Coalition, the I-70 Collaborative Effort, CASA of the Continental Divide, Habitat for Humanity of Colorado, Breckenridge Heritage Alliance, Bull Moose Sportsmen's Alliance, Rotary International, Little Red Schoolhouse, the Summit County Chamber of Commerce, the Colorado Counties Incorporated Transportation Committee, and the Colorado Mountain College Community Advisory Board. He is a mountain mentor with Summit County Youth and Family Services and teaches skiing at the Breckenridge Nordic Center. Dan also enjoys living in the high country and everything it has to offer, such as telemark and cross-country skiing, hiking, mountain biking, hunting, and fishing. He is a resident of Breckenridge, where he lives with his wife, Johanna, daughter, Grace, and canine companion, Tuff. He's a graduate of Western State Colorado University. And now, Allen Bacher. Allen is currently a board member with the Summit Chamber, has been for the past 4 years, and currently serving as the board secretary. He is a member of the Breckenridge Resort Chamber, now known as GoBrec, a destination marketing organization, as well as the Dillon Business Association. He is a former board member with the St. Peters, Missouri Chamber of Commerce and a member of O'Fallon, Missouri, St. Charles, Missouri, and Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri Chambers of Commerce. He's a former member of the St. Charles County, Missouri Economic Development Council. He is currently and has been an adjunct professor for the past 5 years at Colorado Mountain College in the AA and BSBA degree programs in business, economics, management, marketing, and strategic planning. He has over 40 years prior adjunct experience in Northern Virginia, Missouri, and Colorado, with an MBA-level experience at Lindenwood University in St. Charles, Missouri. He has provided business development and counseling services for the Center for Business Success an initiative by Colorado Mountain College in conjunction with the Small Business Development Center, the SBDC, and Small Business Administration in Summit County. Allen has been a landowner in Summit County since 1991 and a self-built homeowner since 2006. He's been active in local affairs and worthwhile nonprofit organizations throughout the Summit County area for the past decade. He is a prior board member for 25 years with Boone Center Incorporated, a not-for-profit organization that provides meaningful and fulfilling employment for over 200 people with developmental disabilities. Allen is a U.S. Army veteran with service in Southeast Asia, a pilot, air traffic controller, FAA certified examiner, and instructor. He has owned and operated 4 previous successful companies, has held RE and all insurance industry licenses, a former senior-level corporate executive with international experience, and business development with an industry-dominant company formerly based in Alexandria, Virginia, and St. Charles, Missouri. He has developed and led strategic planning conferences and implementation for numerous organizations. He has over 35 years' experience in business acquisitions, development, divestitures, mergers, startups, and valuations. Originally born in Washington, D.C., he grew up in Fairfax County, Virginia, in a family-owned business. He holds a BSBA from George Mason University, Fairfax, Virginia, and an MBA from Lindenwood University, St. Charles, Missouri. Hopefully I got both those bios right, gentlemen.
Did a good job, bro.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to start with the questions right now. I started off with Dan's bio first, so Dan, I'm going to ask you to start the first question here.
Sure.
And basically, like it is with most of the candidate forums, the first question is a pretty obvious one. Why are you running for Summit County Commissioner in District 1?
Great. Well, Roman and folks listening, first of all, thank you, Roman, for organizing this. I think it's a great service for our community. But I'm running as a county commissioner. I'm a current county commissioner because I just love our community of Summit County so much, and I want to give back to the community that's been so great to me. I think it's really important to be a real problem solver in our community and go to bat for our community when there are challenging situations that come up. I'm the guy, just seems like yesterday, but when the Dillon Dam Road closed, I hightailed it right down to Denver to say, Denver Water, you better open up that door. More recently, when Marguerite Salazar and the state decided to change geographical areas on healthcare, I was the one that demanded meetings that worked extremely hard to go to bat for our community, whether the governor was a Democrat or Republican or unaffiliated. It didn't matter to me. I've gone to bat for this community, and I just love it so much, and I'll continue to do that with your support.
Thank you, Dan. And Allen, same question. Why are you running for Summit County Commissioner in District 1?
I'm running, Roman, because I believe there should always be an alternative for the voters. I believe there should be a clear and concise choice between one candidate and another, one philosophy and another. And as such, I'm simply saying I'm a Jeffersonian at heart. I believe in the principle of a citizen servant. You come, you serve, and you go home. So I represent a different point of view. I represent an alternative for the voters. I am experienced, I am seasoned, and I'm knowledgeable. Thank you.
Thank you, Allen. And Allen, catch your breath there because you're going to start off with question number 2 that I'll have. Question number 2 is rank in the order of importance what you consider to be the top 3 issues we face in Summit County and how you are or would address them.
Okay. The first thing I see is the biggest issue for Summit County right now is the need for the diversity of business. What we are is basically a one-trick pony town and county. We are resort-based. If we do not institute a strong economic development council authority to lay out a plan for the future, then when we do get the 2 or 3 years of bad weather, i.e. no snow, we're going to see a tremendous economic collapse here. And so therefore we need that diversity. That's the one thing that I see first. The second one is the employee housing issue. I think good progress has been made along that level. However, I also see a greater need than what is being done at this time. I hearken back to the fact I worked for Vail Resorts at the Breck's Resort for a couple of winters, and last year they tried to get new hires in the middle of the winter. They couldn't find a place to lay their head, and therefore did not come to work. So Breck was working on a short staff type of basis. Finally, the third thing is the overall need for this county to be more vibrant and have a different point of view.
Thank you, Allen. And Dan, same question. Rank in the order of importance what you consider to be the top 3 issues we face in Summit County, and how are you or would address them?
As I campaign, I've knocked on over thousands of doors in our community to really ask people, what's on your mind? What should I be working on? And time again, 3 major topics that come up: the environment, housing, and transportation issues. On the environment, if we take a step back and say, what are the real drivers in our community? What drives the second homeowners to want to have a place here? What drives real estate? Why do people really want to come here? Well, it's the world-class skiing, hiking, mountain biking, the views that we have that are just so tremendous. So the more that we can do, in my opinion, to protect the environment, I think that's really important for our economy. On the housing front, I've worked really hard on the Lake Hill Affordable Housing Act, spent some time in D.C. to try to get that bill through Congress. Grateful that bill passed. We're in the process of looking at the land in terms of the valuation, and then we'll purchase that. And we're working on partnerships, everyone from Breckenridge to Frisco. I believe strongly in looking at collaborative governance. Summit County can't handle this all by ourselves in terms of housing, but let's look at how we can partner. On transportation, boy, that's our bread and butter. I-70 is our artery heading up here to the high country. So I've worked for many years, whether it's on the I-70 Collaborative, I-70 Coalition, to really look at improvements to existing highways, but also look at improvements to our critical infrastructure right here in our community, in particular Highway 9. And we're going to see most of those projects be completed locally right by the end of October to early December.
Thank you, Dan. Catch your breath. I've got the next question for you to start off with. What do you understand to be the responsibilities, duties of the Summit County Commissioner in District 1?
Great. Well, I'm the current Summit County Commissioner, so I definitely understand some of those duties. But for folks that may or may not know, some of the services that we provide and do, we run social services, environmental health, we run the jail, we run elections, we have the assessor's office, we have the clerk and recorder's office, we have open space and trails department. So the big picture is there are 3 county commissioners, and we oversee, we develop and put together the budget and put that forward. We're constantly in budget stage. I mean, we look at the budget weekly, and right now we are in the process of working with department heads to really figure out and fine-tune how we deal with a budget when we've had about 22% less revenues coming in terms of assessed valuations. We've seen a decrease in property valuations, which is about 40% of our revenues. So the big picture is we put the budget together, we make sure that everything runs smoothly in our county, but I also think it's really important that I view my role as almost like an ambassador for the county as well. There are a lot of meetings that I'm in Denver or the Western Slope, attending water forums, business forums, transportation forums, and to really be the eyes and ears and the voice of Summit County.
Thank you, Dan. And Allen, what do you understand to be the responsibilities and duties of the Summit County Commissioner in District 1?
Well, Roman, I'll look at it in a little bit different light. To me, the county commission is the board of directors of an organization. Now, currently the county has around a $60 million revenue input. And, I have experience. I used to run an $85, $95 million worldwide company. The issue of a board of directors is they set the tone, they set the vision, and then they have department heads who are responsible for implementing that. The follow-up of the board is basically to make sure that those things are being implemented in a way in which is quantifiable, measurable, and accountable as well.
Thank you, Allen. And the next question will be yours to start off with. If elected, You have to answer the questions and concerns of your constituency on both sides of the so-called political fence, not just those that align themselves with your particular political party. How will you do that?
The issue more than anything else is always be available and open. I've already published my personal phone number, my personal email. I am available around the county on a regular basis at different forums. I've met with prior county commissioners, gotten their input about things that they believe should be changed, could be changed, and hopefully will be changed. I only ask anybody who brings something to my attention is when you bring an issue, bring a solution, bring a working suggestion that can be thought about and looked at and hopefully brought forward to where it meets the needs of the majority of the interested parties. It's almost impossible to get a perfect 100% answer.
Thank you, Allen. And Dan, same question. If elected or reelected, I guess in this case, you have to answer the questions and concerns of your constituency on both sides of the so-called political fence, not just those that align themselves with your political party. How will you do that?
Well, I'm really proud to have the support of my Republican friends, my Democrat friends, my Libertarian friends, and Green Party friends. And I've always worked really hard to not be partisan at all. That's actually one of the major reasons why I decided to give up my Senate seat and not run for re-election. I could have decided to run for one more term, but I have to tell you, the atmosphere in Denver is quite toxic at the Capitol, to say the least. And I find it so refreshing in Summit County where I walk down the street or I knock on a door and I say, hey, I'm Dan Gibbs, I'm your county commissioner. Let's talk about the challenges in our local community. How can I work for you? People don't ask me, oh, are you Dan Gibbs, the Democrat, or Dan Gibbs, the Republican, or whatever. Our community is not a partisan community, and I really enjoy that aspect. And I don't think there's anything partisan, frankly, about being a county commissioner. If you look at past commissions, when Commissioner Tom Long was there with Commissioner Gary Lindstrom and Bill Wallace, they voted together, I would say, 99.9% of the time, and really looked at what were the challenges locally and how do we all work together to solve those problems. And that's how I see my role as a problem solver, as someone that wants to work in a collaborative way. And that is not Republican or Democrat. It's just the Summit County way.
Thank you, Dan. And also, Dan, to start off the next question, looking at the big picture, what do you envision for Summit County 5 to 10 years down the road? And does this come from you personally, those in your party, from citizens in general, or all three?
Yeah, the big picture in terms of challenges that I see in the future, I would love to see, for example, some of the transportation projects that I've worked on throughout the years. The Iron Springs realignment, we received transportation funding through the state. It's about a $17 million project to look at the realignment. And I'm hoping that they'll go to construction as early as 2015. The housing challenges, the Lake Hill bill, worked on that for the last 5 years. I think it would just be incredible to see it totally complete, 5 or 10 years down the road, to really look at how we fund and how we house people. I feel strongly that people should be able to live where they work and work where they live and not be a bedroom community for other areas in our surrounding areas. And so I think that's really important. But I'd say most importantly, I think it's really important to have the county be in sound fiscal shape. Right now, we are still in the 3.6% down in terms of assessed valuations. And actually, when you look at sales tax for our area, we are still about $650,000 less since 2007. And so, I'm hopeful that sales tax, it's looking better. But I'm hoping that will continue to rise, and I'm hoping that assessed valuations for property tax will rise come the next assessed valuation time period to give us, better financial shape for our community.
Thank you, Dan. And Allen, looking at the big picture, what do you envision for Summit County, say 5 to 10 years down the road? And does that come from you personally, those in your party, from citizens in general, or all three?
I think from all three. The one thing I see is that as Summit County grows, and if it diversifies successfully in terms of economic development, other jobs available rather than just resort-based, we're going to face the issue of whether this should be a city-county. The fact of the matter is there's efficacies and efficiencies to be gained by looking at the fire departments, pulling them together, which is a question we may talk about later. The ambulance district is a issue. The transportation around the county and a better coordination there. So for me, in the future is what will be the sensible economic development and growth? What will be the transportation needs? And then we're talking about, as Dan had said, the environmental infrastructure that's necessary to support that. We also have a fractured sewer water issue that we're going to have to resolve.
Thank you, Allen. And you'll field this next question, which ironically also relates to a part of your answer on the last question.
Okay.
There has been talk about combining red, white, and blue with Lake Dillon Fire Rescue and Copper Mountain Fire for quite some time for the sake of efficiency and other reasons. Do you think this is a good idea? Why or why not?
Well, on the surface, you would say, sounds like a good idea. Sounds like a gain in terms of utilization of resources. The issue more than anything else is where are the services and the resources really needed? Now you have 3 different administrations that you have to deal with, and those carry incumbent cost with them. So therefore, I believe that combination makes sense, but I also would say also include the ambulance district in with it.
Dan, same question. There has been talk for a while about combining red, white, and blue with Lake Dillon Fire Rescue and Copper Mountain Fire for quite some time for sake of efficiency and other reasons. Is this a good idea? Why or why not?
I think it is an excellent idea. I'm personally affiliated with Lake Dillon Fire Rescue, so just for open disclosure with that, I work almost daily with the 3 different chiefs of the 3 different fire protection districts, as well as the folks on the ground, the men and women that are on the ground firefighters. I do think it's a good idea. I was disappointed when the talks really stopped, especially when you look at red, white, and blue and Lake Dillon now having an identical mill rate. It's a little bit different with Copper Mountain because they're Copper Mountain Metropolitan District, so it's a little bit different kind of governance. But when you look at services in our community, we are such a small community, and there's already enormous amount of cross-training already. So let's say hypothetically there's a major fire in the red, white, and blue area. Well, there's folks from Lake Dillon that will help offset the need in their Station 4, for example. And so there's already cross-training, there's already mutual aid going on, and we're all brothers and sisters of the fire world at the end of the day. And I think it would be great service for our community to revisit that down the road. I'm cautious of telling other special districts what they should or shouldn't do, because it is another independently elected board, and there's some wonderful people that serve on those boards. But I would love to see them revisit that down the road.
Thank you, Dan. And also the next question, Dan, we'll start with you on this. The subject of eminent domain has been raised in the light of recent events. Again, how do you define it and defend it when it gets used, since it can be perceived by ordinary citizens as a government power grab, affecting those ordinary citizens who may feel powerless to stop it?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, eminent domain is the use of governments to take over private land for some beneficial good for the public. So we've seen eminent domain use in Colorado throughout the United States. Most commonly, I would say historically, through highways. Coors Field, for example, down in Denver was eminent domain. And we have seen that used for open spaces as well. And I think it should be used very, very rarely. I personally have big-time challenges with it. However, I did vote to approve a very unique case in Summit County, and I doubt we have time to talk about the specifics of that, but hopefully later on we will. But in that particular case, I was really looking at the big picture of protecting our economy, in my opinion, where there's a landowner that was using particular land commercially, illegally, looking for motorized access to a particular area that was illegal, and then opening up the possibility of what's called RS 2477 rights-of-way claims, which is an old 1860s mining law where, if approved, would have devastating impacts in our community, where literally someone could have a mining claim and say, I'm going to put a highway to that spot or that spot or that spot. And we could just imagine in Summit County what that would mean to our economy, when my opinion is really our environment is our economic driver. So I'd say very, very, very rarely use it.
Thank you, Dan. And Allen, the subject of eminent domain has been raised in light of recent events again. How do you define it and defend it if, when it gets used, it can be perceived as a government power grab affecting ordinary citizens who may feel powerless to stop it?
Well, I feel eminent domain is an issue that was debated 200 plus years ago. The framers of our Constitution, there was a certain faction there that did not want to grant any government entity the right of eminent domain, and there was another faction that said, no, we have to have that for doing the public good. Now, the issue on eminent domain is the public good. Is it really being used? We've seen across this country abuse of eminent domain by governmental authorities. It should only be used when there is a clear-cut, beneficial gain in the public interest. That's my feeling on it.
Has that been your case as far as what you've experienced or what you see?
I think that the use of eminent domain has to be done very judiciously in discussion with other prior commissioners. They basically took the stance and had told the county managers, never bring us a case of eminent domain. We don't believe in it. But I'm open. If it's a good use, yeah. If it's to settle a dispute that could have been done through other means, arbitration perhaps, involvement of interested parties, I would go that route before I would exercise an eminent domain.
Okay, thank you. And Allen, somewhat related to that, acquisitions of land to be designated open space and trails effectively remove development from any kind in that area, whether it's for residential or business. How is or should the determination be made when looking at an area for that purpose of designating it an open space and trail area?
Well, one of the ironies we faced here in Colorado is roughly, 70% of all the land is under control of some sort of governmental agencies, Forestry Service, county land, state land, etc. For me, the ideal model of creating open space really should lie in the private sector, personal philanthropy, etc. The model I think works so well in the United States is one that Ted Turner employed. Created his TNT empire, his CNN, etc., and currently is the largest grantor of a land trust here in the United States, with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of acres up in Wyoming and Montana. I don't really think that it's the government's responsibility to acquire and set aside more land.
Thank you, Allen. And Dan, acquisitions of land to be designated open space and trails effectively remove development of any kind in that area, whether for residential or business. How is or should the determination be made when looking at an area for that purpose?
Our community has time and time again supported the acquisition of open space for the benefit of our community. Back in 1999, the question actually to tax ourselves in Summit County, whether or not we should have a dedicated fund to do that particular purpose, passed 65 to 35%. And since 1999, it's passed by huge margins, 1999, 2003, 2008. In Summit County alone, we've had over 14,000 acres protected from for open space. We've had 20 miles of natural services and trails constructed to help protect. We've had 330 volunteer hours in 2013 alone. So I think it's really important in our community, even though we are a community that has over 80% federal lands, that our community really wants to step forward to continue to support open spaces in their backyards. So I definitely support that. And we have an open space and trails department that we really look at what the big picture is for our community in terms of what properties are most valuable to purchase. And we look for opportunities to work with towns. We just teamed up with the town of Breckenridge just last week to buy the old Larimer Mill plaster up on Baldy. And I think that's really exciting when we can stretch county funds and work with local communities to really benefit our whole community at the end of the day.
Thank you, Dan. And Dan, for the next question, what do you see as the future challenges for Summit County government, and what can you help do to meet those challenges?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of challenges. I mean, property tax revenues have decreased 17% in 2013 due to decline assessed valuations. That equaled about $4 million of less revenue for Summit County government. On top of that, we're currently in this assessed valuation for 2014 where we've had additional 3.9% down. And the big picture is we have challenges funding certain programs in our community. Ambulance, number one. Just last year alone, we pumped in about $400,000 extra to make sure that we have a world-class ambulance system. Just imagine, folks, that right now the current system is set up where for every 10 calls, only 6 people pay. And that's 60%. So that's a great percentage, actually, in Colorado and nationally in terms of recouping costs. But when someone gets hurt in our community and you call 911, well, you have to pick them up. You have to treat them. You can't necessarily say, okay, do you have an insurance card or not? And so we've been running that on an enterprise status for years. And with Medicaid, Medicare reimbursement rates are cents literally on the dollar. And we're seeing more and more Medicaid and Medicare patients. It's just a real challenge. And so, I hope folks really consider voting for question 1A that they'll have before them this November that will really help shore up our critical, not only 911 needs in our community, our ambulance needs, but also we'll look at water quality. So those are 3 major areas that I think we need to work on.
Thank you, Dan. And Allen, what do you see as the future challenges for Summit County government, and what can you do to help meet those challenges?
Well, Dan brought up an interesting statement there on 1A. And I just have to say I was a little disappointed in the wording as it came to the ballot, in that it lumped 4 disparate needs together under one ballot issue. I would have preferred to see it out as 4 separate questions, whether the people want to step up for forest, mine mitigation, the improvement of the 911 coverage, as well as the ambulance. I think as far as the ambulance, I think we need to step back and look at it and say, 60%, what can we do to recover that other 40%? And the fact of the matter is, you mentioned Medicare and Medicaid. It's just going to get worse, the reimbursements, as we roll out the Affordable Health Care Act is going to impact those reimbursements to the ambulance district. So we need to roll up our sleeves and really look at that. I'm against 1A simply because it's all lumped together in one.
Thank you, Allen. And Allen, next question. What skill set do you think you possess that makes you someone who is better suited to do the job required to be the Summit County Commissioner representing District 1?
In terms of skill set, experience, background, intellect, I ran multi-million-dollar international corporation. I have a wide diversity of experience. I believe that I am experienced and seasoned in bringing in a new perspective to the county and looking at the things that need to be done, maybe with a different eye and a different point of view.
All righty, Allen, thank you very much. And Dan, what skill set do you think you possess that makes you someone who is better suited to do the job required to be a Summit County Commissioner representing District 1 than your opponent?
Roman, because I'm hungry. I love the job. I love our community. I'm the only one that's had experience going to bat against Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated. I don't care how they're registered. I've gone to bat for our community, and I haven't seen my opponent do anything like that. My heart is here locally. When I served in the state Senate, I voted on a $18.4 billion budget looking at what services were needed in the whole state of Colorado. And now as a county commissioner, I look at how we support our $24 million budget in terms of general fund and what services are most needed in our community. I knock on hundreds of doors, thousands of doors in our community to really figure out how I can best serve our community. And I think I'm a good listener, and I really work hard to try to turn what I hear from people into action. And I've had a history of doing that in my elected career. So I think that's what separates me.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for bringing up the word hungry. Missing dinner right now. My stomach's growling a little bit there, but we'll have opportunity to go have dinner here in about 20 minutes or so. Dan, the next question is for you to answer first. Are there areas of Summit County government that need to be looked at to make them more efficient? If so, what are they, and what do you think can or should be done?
Yes. I mentioned earlier that our budget process is a weekly occurrence. Marty Ferris, she's a wizard. She just does an amazing job, and we work closely with her to really figure out what the best needs, what type of services do we really need to provide, what's lacking, and so forth. But we saw a downturn of the economy, and actually back in 2011, we laid off over 20 people. We made some people oversee multiple different programs. We've looked at creative ways to offset those declining revenues. We've looked at additional federal funds, state funds, various different grants to be creative. And my hope is that as we move forward, after we did lay off about 20 people, that we can really look at providing the best possible services for our community, and with a very efficient and manner. So,
all right, thank you, Dan. And Allen, are there areas of Summit County government that need to be looked at to make them more efficient? If so, what are they, and what can be done?
Well, a couple come to mind that people have brought to my attention. They would like to see a better pre-planning, a better proactive effort out of Road and Bridge. There are areas of the county that the biggest one, I think it was handled real well, but the disaster over at Montezuma, the washout. And I've heard from prior commissioners saying, that's been done before. We should have done something before it happened again. But, that doesn't lay at anybody's doorstep. Planning and zoning is an area. I've heard from a number of builders, experienced it myself. The process that goes through is laborious in planning and zoning, and it probably could be streamlined to the benefit of everybody involved. Finally, I'm looking at the efficacy of the expenditures. One of the things that I have looked at governments over the years is basically, rarely do they ever go back and say, this program's really not working. And do we fix it, or do we get rid of it and put in something better?
Thank you, Allen. And Allen, also, the final common question that I have for you gentlemen tonight, something that we had to experience here in Summit County, as a lot of people did in Colorado and really the western part of the United States, was beetle kill. And that, even though it seems to have tapered off a little bit, the damage has been done, and there's a lot of those dead beetle-killed trees that are just lying around. There has been certainly efforts to move them out of the way so they're not just laying around and are fuel for a possible fire. One of the questions that I hear a lot from just somebody that when we talk about stuff is, why can't the average citizen in Summit County, for instance, just grab their chainsaw and go to some area where there's a lot of dead trees and just start cutting them up and using them for firewood? And in essence, and this is what I hear from the same people, it's like, wouldn't that save the county, the government, money, if they could just take their chainsaws and go up to an area where there's a lot of trees that are really a possible fuel for a fire, and take the initiative themselves and remove some of those trees and utilize some of those trees for their own use.
Well,
Allen?
that's an interesting observation. Of course, what comes to mind is creative chaos if everybody ran out into the woods. Do you have a chainsaw?
No, but I'm looking for one.
Dan, do you have a chainsaw?
I have a couple.
Okay, I have chainsaws too. Now, I live up on Courts, up top of Ski Hill Road, American Way, and we were proactive up in our neighborhood. Used to be you had to go to the Forestry Service and pay them money for a permit to go and clean out dead wood. Now they're more than happy, just let us know what you want to do, and they'll issue one. I think communities could organize some cutting, but it has to be coordinated. And the permitting process right now from the Forestry Service is very reasonable. They're happy to have you go in there and cut out the dead wood and clear out. Well, the irony is when I was building up here originally, it was I was down for fire mitigation, and they said, well, you got to have 10 feet back between the house and 10 feet between the crowns. And how about if I just cut down 30 feet back? And the person went, you do that? Do you know what kind of arguments we get in the trees? The real issue was nobody in the bureaucracy was proactive when they first discovered the infestation to take and do the ounce of prevention and avoid the pound of cure.
Thank you, Ellen and Dan. Same question. Why can't people just grab their chainsaws and help remove some of the dead beetle-killed trees for use as firewood, or probably whatever they want to, I guess, saving the county money? And some of that money, I believe, is spent to clear that out by professional organizations. You see professional trucks, looks like professionals that go up there that are, they're doing a great job, but there's so much of that right now that it seems like it would be a faster process if citizens that had the desire could go up there and do that.
That's an interesting question, to say the least. First of all, to answer your question, it's illegal to do that. We have 80% federal lands, and you can't just go on to federal lands and start cutting down trees wherever you want to. However, as Al mentioned, there are avenues that you can do some of that. There's a provision that Congress passed called the Wyden Amendment, and also there's a provision that the Colorado State Forest Service implements that's very unique. Colorado is actually the only state that allows this, which is called the Good Neighbor Authority. So you can work with the local state forest service. It used to be Paul Cada in here in this area, but now Ron Kuzno helps oversee that. Contact the state forest service, work with them on a plan in terms of defensible space, especially if your home is adjacent to U.S. Forest Service land, so you can do some of those buffers that are really needed. I'm a big, and then also part of your question is not accurate as well. We don't put county funds for treating federal lands. It's all taxpayer supported. And what we do see as a major issue in our community that I'm really working hard, that actually just got noticed just a few days ago, is that a lot of the thinning projects that we see, especially in the Breckenridge area, where you have literally 15,000 piles ready to be burned, but the right hand is not talking to the left hand. The folks in the right hand are cutting the trees down, but then the left hand are the fire folks that are looking at major fuels being built up. Well, I just got word that the U.S. Forest Service has the funding to burn those piles this coming winter, which I think is just a win-win for our community. But we have our hazardous fuels reduction grant program in our community, and we really focus on private landowners, private lands, not federal, for that.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. That's always been one that seems to always come up. People just, I guess, because there's much more to it, obviously, than maybe the average ordinary citizen is aware of. And you see all these trees, and it's like, well, there's this, it's like, why can't I just go up and help out and help me out too by doing something like that? So that wraps up the last of our common questions. And our common questions were reviewed by our candidates 30 minutes before we came on to do this forum tonight. That's how we work this. That's how we've always done it in the past. So the candidates tonight, Allen Bacher and Dan Gibbs, got to look at all these questions. There were 12 of them. And they got to look at these questions about 30 minutes before we went on here. Now, I've got one question for each candidate that neither one of the candidates have seen. And it will be a little bit different because we like to not make it just a softball game here, but also make it a little more challenging. And I find Dan and Allen to be both engaging, and hopefully they don't storm out of here afterwards because I threw these questions out there. Dan, you were the last one to answer a question, so I'll start off with you on answering this question. And the question is somewhat of a lengthy one to start with, that it leads up to the question. Last month, the Summit County Commissioners voted in favor of a resolution to refer a measure to the November ballot that would provide $3.73 million in temporary funding annually for water protection, water quality protection, wildfire response, 911 dispatch, and emergency services, including ambulance services. If approved by the voters, the measure would enact a property tax mill levy for a period of 8 years, resulting in an increase of $19.24 per year per $100,000 of residential property value during the first fiscal year of the new levy. In the release that I got on this, it just talked about those numbers in the first fiscal year. The measure would provide $1.65 million in funding for the Summit County Ambulance Service for the first year alone. Since that service has been essentially losing money since the opening of St. Anthony Summit Medical Center and is projected to lose even more money with each successive year, why do you feel it's necessary that taxpayers should bear the burden of keeping it operating when it seems that there are other options? First responders, fire department, that can basically do much of what they do.
Excellent question. And this is perfect because this is something that I've been working day and night on. We are working with all 3 fire protection districts, and I agree that it's wonderful if we can insert fire into EMS, and that's what's going on right now. Red, white, and blue, they have every first call in terms of a 911 call in the red, white, and blue jurisdictional area. And right now, we're working with Lake Dillon and Copper Mountain as well to figure out how we can insert. Many of the firefighters are minimum of EMTB. Many of them are paramedics as well. But how can we look at, in my opinion, in some cases, underutilized resources where 95% of the calls right now for fire are actually medical related, and about 3 to 4% of the calls are actually fire related. And so if many of them are trained already as EMTs and paramedics, why can't we use their expertise and skill and help us out at the end of the day? So that's actually why we have an 8-year time frame, because as we talked about earlier in terms of possible consolidation with 3 different fire districts, well, they had discussions for many, many years, and unfortunately, those discussions didn't really go anywhere. We're in critical stage in terms of providing critical infrastructure and needs for our community for 911 as well as ambulance, and we need some time to work this out. But literally, we have meetings often, and I'm really excited to say that all 3 fire protection districts are going to be supporting Measure 1A this November, and I urge all of you to support that as well.
All right, thank you, Dan. And I didn't mention it beforehand, but I was going to mention, and I forgot to mention, my apologies, that if you want to have a little extra time to go into this for that question, you're certainly more than welcome to do that. So if there's anything else you want to add, feel free to do that right now.
You know, I just think it would be wonderful for our community to add this expertise of fire to work with our just amazing staff with EMS. And we're a small community, and I think when you look at critical infrastructure and services for a small community, let's have everyone involved to really go to bat to figure out how we can provide the best services at a low cost for the taxpayer. And I'd love to see other examples of that in the future as well, frankly. I think we could explore police services in our community as well, to have one service for our community. But there are multiple ways that we could work together in the future to look at creative partnerships. But that's one that we're working day and night on, to say the least, to try to find that win-win ground.
Thank you, Dan. And that is something that Allen, I know that you had kind of touched on as far as, this measure, but that's not going to be your question. Your question is, and you can certainly touch on that if you'd like, because I'm going to give you at least a couple of minutes here. Normally we'd have a 93-second time limit, but go ahead and feel free to take a couple of minutes if you'd like. And if you want to touch on that, that's fine. But your question that I want you to focus on and answer is, it appears that you do have an uphill battle to take the seat away from Dan Gibbs. In order to do that, you'll have to get unaffiliated voters and probably some Democrats to vote for you. What can you say now and in the very near future to those people to convince them you are the best candidate that will look out for their interests, even though they may not align themselves with the Republican Party, which you're part of?
Well, Roman, you present a very troubling question, okay? And the reason is, in this country, we only have two parties that really have any chance of being elected. The rest of the parties are outliers. And so we, by very nature, have to affiliate with one or the other if we're going to oppose one another. There are many things that Dan and I do agree on. There are other things fundamentally we don't. One of the things is, I believe that government by itself is inefficient. And so I'm saying to the citizens, there's roughly 5,200 registered Democrats, 4,900 Republicans. Both parties have, probably 1,000 not active, and we got 8,000 or 9,000 independents. So in this county, as well as other places, the independents really decide what's going to happen. So I basically say to them, do you like the way things are going? Would you like to see something different? Would you like to have a different point of view and a different opinion that isn't tied necessarily to an ideology of a political party?
All right. Thank you very much, Allen. Gentlemen, that takes care of the questions from me for this second in a series of live candidate forums on Crystal 93. Before we wrap it up here, I do want to give you the opportunity to ask each other one question, and you'll have 2 minutes each to answer those questions, and that should take us up to about the top of the hour. So, Allen, since you just finished asking or answering the question I gave for you, I will afford you the opportunity to ask Dan Gibbs one question right now.
Well, thank you, Roman. I'm going to defer and say, Dan, go first, like we did with the coin flip.
I was actually going to say, I'm not into gotcha politics.
Right.
And I don't really know you all that well, but any of the questions I would ask you are really not policy related, because we haven't really been in the same meetings in terms of policy. So actually, I do not have any question. I don't have any question for Allen at all. So,
okay. Well, Dan, I know you only briefly in being around the town, the county. We serve on the chamber together, etc. And the thing that I've noticed about you, I think you're very straightforward. I think you're very diligent. You have served in a lot of different functions here in the state of Colorado. So the only thing I have to ask of you is, when your term as commissioner is up, whether it's this year or 4 years from now, what's your next step?
You want to hire me for something? I really, truly love being a county commissioner right now, and I really enjoyed the experience serving at the Capitol, but it was a partisan gridlock, to say the least, and I feel like at the local level, there's a lot of action here, so the more Washington, D.C. gets more dysfunctional, the more that trickles to state government, the more action you can have at the local level to look at partnerships like the Harris Street Community Center that we're looking at for the library in the Breckenridge area. We're partnering with CDOT on transportation proposals, but I really have no idea. I'm really working hard to win this election and really hope to have folks support, but I have no idea. I've never planned out I'm going to run for this or that or that. I've always just worked my tail off, and good things have happened to me.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. And one final thing tonight, I need a closing statement from both of you. And Dan, since you just answered that question, if you would go ahead and please give your closing statement. You have 93 seconds.
Great. I mentioned earlier that I'm running for office because I love our community and I really want to give back to our community. I feel like I'm a good listener. I feel like as a county commissioner, it's important to be a good listener and really put those concerns into action. And I feel like when I look back at me being elected official, some of the things I've done in our community, I think will and have made a lasting impact. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So I'm really proud of the work I did on Colorado Mountain College to offer 4-year degrees for folks. We all have multiple friends. I know that you work there as well, but that moved here years ago that weren't able to finish their degrees or want to look at extra opportunities to further their education. The chain law bill that looked at imposing truckers to impose stricter penalties in the wintertime, I think that had a really important bite to our community. But when you look at the challenges that I see ahead, whether it's healthcare, where I've gone down to the Capitol and demanded by the governor, we have to change this geographic area. We have to do something. The cost of living is already through the roof in our community. Whether it's looking at creative partnerships with the town of Breck or the other towns, I've been in the middle of a lot of that. And if you really want a fighter, someone that is not worried about Republican ideology or Democrat ideology or independent ideology, I'm the guy for you. I'm the guy that have stood up for this community and has gone to bat for them. And I'll continue to do that. And I just ask for your support.
Thank you, Dan. And Allen, your closing statement, sir, with 93-second time limit.
Well, I asked the people to take and go to my website, Bacher4Commissioner.com. That's Bacher, Roman numeral, not the Roman numeral 4, but the numeral 4. Commissioner.com, and look at what my beliefs and my commitments are. I believe that at all levels, government has become too intrusive in our lives, and that as a county commissioner, I'm going to take and do a SWOT analysis on most of the government, saying what's the strength, what's the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. Where can we be more efficient and get a better bang for the buck? My commitment is very simple, a different point of view, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you very much, Allen. And Dan, Allen, it's been a real honor having both of you in the Crystal 93 studios tonight. I do appreciate you taking the time to do this once again. I want to mention that. And we are certainly very fortunate to be here in Summit County, where we have quality people, a quality way of life, and I think that's what it's all about. I do encourage anyone listening or watching to do your homework, because this is what it's about in our form of government. It's not a standing on the sidelines kind of thing. It's being active. And that doesn't mean you have to do it every single day, but do it when it counts. And this is the time when it counts. So one more time, if I can get you and Allen, Dan, we'll start with you. Give out a website or phone number or email address where people can go for more information.
Yeah, sure. My cell phone, first of all, is 333-4707, and the best email for me is dan@dangibbs.com. If folks want to learn more about me, there's been a lot of articles throughout the years, so I think for a non-impartial view of me, I would say just Google my name, Dan Gibbs. You'll see a lot of different articles, maybe some that are great, maybe some that are not, but that's a good way, I think, for people to kind of know who I am, is just to have a non-partial view from the articles that have been written about me throughout the years.
And Allen, if someone needs to ask you some more questions and wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
My personal cell phone number is 970-402-3023. My email address is bacher4summit@gmail.com. And my website, of course, is Bacher4Commissioner.com.
Allen, Dan, thank you so much again. And have a wonderful Sunday evening, and best of luck to both of you. You're listening to KYSL Frisco.
Your highway information station is Crystal 93.
Covering the I-70 corridor at 93.1 in the Vail Valley, 93.9 in Summit County, and 92.3 from Loveland Ski Area, on top of the Continental Divide.
KYSL Frisco, K226AH Frisco, K222BQ Graymont.
This is Crystal 93.